This edition of the Market Report on ADBN Television. My name is Adefola Olamilekun. On today's edition, we'll be having two-part interview. First, we'll be looking at socio-infrastructural development in Nigeria. That we're supposed to have enough of it to help us support businesses. Then the second part will be sustaining the momentum of investors in the gas ecosystem of Nigeria. First, Nigeria's socio-economic infrastructural development background shows that infrastructure is the foundation for a variety of activities that play a critical role in determining the standard of living in many countries, as well as supporting businesses. And according to the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, infrastructure is a broad term that can be classified into four essential components, such as energy, transportation, telecommunication, and the environment. Although there are two types of infrastructure: economic infrastructure and social infrastructure. And for economic infrastructure, it's a set of essential services that help in the growth of economy of a nation and include road, communication, sewage, water, airport, power, etc. Where social infrastructure includes schools, affordable housing, hospital, etc. In Nigeria, the provision of social economic infrastructure is in short supply, and this is posing a threat to the country's economic growth and the survival of our citizens. Infrastructure is currently the most challenging factor hampering the country's effort to achieve long-term economic and social development. Inadequate deterioration of infrastructure is a problem and is still stifle the growth of Nigerian economy. Meanwhile, many Nigerians and businesses are suffering from insufficient infrastructure such as electricity, good road, safe drinking water, as well as improved sanitation. With the above, there seems to be a challenge in a path to economic development of Nigeria. Joining me today to help us analyze and take a cue on this infrastructural deficit in Nigeria is Simbo Olorunfemi, a policy analyst as well as a development expert that will be joining me on the show so that we can extract the issue around what is happening to our infrastructure, the need to investigate the effect of social infrastructure on economic development in Nigeria, and the importance of social economic infrastructure on living standard of Nigerian businesses as well as the economic growth of Nigeria. Meanwhile, this particular issue of social infrastructure has also been on the table of the federal government of Nigeria. That's why in recent time you hear the federal government saying that spending so much on road infrastructure like the Lagos-Calabar super highway, like the Lagos-Badagry-Sokoto super highway, and other gigantic infrastructure they are bringing in place. But the deficiency of the aforementioned amenities have hindered economic development in recent Nigerian economic history. To improve the standard of living of Nigeria and to bring about conducive environment for businesses through the provision of sustainable infrastructure is the key and the way to go. So we just hope that after our discussion today, a lot of ideas will be put forward for both government, private sector, and citizens to understand the essence of social infrastructure and the way it can support businesses in Nigeria, as well as bringing about sustainable in our economy, which is very, very key at this point in time. So, as we await Simbo to join me right now on the show, but the question, okay, very good day to you, Mr. Simbo Olorunfemi. Very good day to you, sir. Well, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've just done that.
All right, that is great. Nice to have you on the show today, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get to the
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
All right, sir. The bone of the discussion is socio-economic infrastructure in Nigeria. Can you help us to understand what this really entails? Because although it sounds a little bit academic, but it deals with the core of Nigerian economic development.
Yes, thank you. You know, like you said, it sounds a bit esoteric. It's like, what is socioeconomic infrastructure? But as you know, infrastructure has gone beyond the original register in which it's used. So we apply it to different facets of life. So it just speaks to, let me just break it down by saying we could talk of hard infrastructure, which more people are familiar with, the physical infrastructure, and then talk about soft infrastructure, which is a synonym for what you might call socioeconomic infrastructure. That means it has to do with all the non-physical things, the human capital developments, things to do with how do you drive that, how do you improve on that, and that's basically what socioeconomic infrastructure is all about. Social infrastructure.
Now,
permit me to to leave it to that.
All right. Now, talking about from what we have given so far is entails some aspect that definitely is support both the citizen as well as the business environment. And for us, we need to combine this together because the citizen aspect is that their living standard need to be improved with all this social economy infrastructure. Meanwhile, for businesses, it has to enhance the drive, the growth of businesses. But from your own understanding so far of Nigerian socio-economic infrastructure deficit, what has been the main issue behind it, talking about the challenges that we have faced? Because if we want to look at the budgetary allocation yearly, just take a cue from 1999 today, a lot of money have gone into that sector. But as we speak, it seems like we have not done anything yet.
Yes, because we can never completely do it right. There is, even if you put all the money that's budgeted in this year's budget, for instance, if you put everything into development of socio-economic infrastructure, you might barely scratch the surface because there's so much to do. There's so much deficit. And I think the best way to look at it is the philosophical angle to it. We have to come to a position where we want to prioritize that. Without making a conscious effort to prioritize that, you might not be able to get it right. And don't forget that you're dealing with an economic outlook that is completely different, that does not prioritize the socioeconomic infrastructure. If you look at the Bretton Woods institution, for instance, you know that this is a long drawn battle. There are people who believe in the trickle-down approach to management of economy, and there are some of us who argue that the best way to grow the economy is to do what we call the bottom-up approach. So the moment you believe in trickle-down, then your emphasis, dating back, if you look at the history of Nigeria, with the introduction of the structural adjustment program, starting from the introduction of the structural adjustment program by Babangida administration in 1985, we've moved gradually away from prioritizing social economic infrastructure because we're told that putting money into university education, things like free education, things like free health programs, all of those things that were articulated by some of our founding fathers are not where we should put money. Of course, I understand how that is because it's, I look at the recent case of subsidy. People think that why a subsidy is a waste. Whereas if you prioritize human capital development, you will realize that it is the software that drives the hardware. But what we find recently is that there's been more emphasis on hardware rather than software because, like I said earlier, physical infrastructure might be the idea. Who is going to use the road if you don't develop the human business? Who are the people who are going to work in the factories? Who are the people who are going to come up with the ideas? Who are the people who are going to be the ideologues? Who are the people who are going to drive the development if you do not invest massively in your social infrastructure? So I think. Okay.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. Just I want to quickly chip in one question here. The moment you landed with your last submission, but go ahead, sir. Let me hear you so that I can bring the question.
No, it's okay. You can come in.
All right. Now, what I'm trying to bring up right now, because what you said in terms of the human capital development is quite key because you very pointed that who is going to drive all on the road if they are not well attained in terms of human capital development? Are we going to work in the factories? It's quite very, very interesting. And this point brings me to the question of human capital gap in Nigeria. The lapses so far that the government have been able to identify. Recently, we see the government training people on ICT. Recently, we see government training people in the agricultural sector. Are we saying that these are not enough in this area of human capital development, particularly in socio-economic infrastructure that you call the soft aspect of it?
No, you have to get the foundation right. What you are doing is that you are working with the superstructure. You have to first get your substructure right. Now, let me take us back what some of us might be familiar with. You remember in the 50s, when we had the regional governments, when we had the government in the western region, in the eastern region, and the northern region. If you understudy what the Awolowo, the action group people did back then, you could see that there was a deliberate investment in soft infrastructure. What did they start out with? They started with primary education. In 1955, Chief Obafemi Awolowo introduced free primary education throughout the region. Today, we have people who are in their 70s and 80s who tell us today that but for that introduction of free primary education, they will not have been able to go to school. And it is on account of what the government did back then that region, the Western region, was able to have like a head start. You understand? So and that's why you see even today in terms of e-commerce in terms of human capital development, that region of the country seems to have an edge. So what am I saying? I'm saying that's the start.
Oh, we're having a network freeze there, but I know Mr.
Primary health is in the purview, is within the purview of the local government. And you see all the talk about local government autonomy. I have my own position on that, but let that not distract us. But what I'm saying is that the primary education, as said, primary, when something is primary, it's fundamental.
Exactly.
It's the starting point. The moment you do not get that right, you cannot get whatever else. You cannot build, as lawyers will tell us, you cannot build something or nothing. So we're told that we have millions of children who are out of school. So the moment you have all of that, how are you going to grow? I mean, how are you going to be able to grow the economy? How are you going to be able to take care of the physical side? So, but you have to understand the other side of this is that
all right, we're having another freeze from that angle, all right, because of network issue. But I know Mr. Simbo Olorunfemi will be back with us. And from the aspect of the argument is that, in as much as socio-economic infrastructure is quite very, very interesting, although the consolidation of the government has been on the hardware include the road, the railway, and the rest of them. But the soft aspect of it is also very, very key, talking about education, human capital development. Although I made mention that recently, larger than this is the aspect of where we need to understand that social infrastructure is key to driving the economy. Mr. Olasunbo, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
We lost you for a few seconds, but you can go ahead with your thoughts, sir.
So I was saying that, if I were the Minister of FCT today, the Minister of FCT is known as Mr. Projects, driving physical infrastructure and all of that. But you can't blame me, he's doing right. But what if he was placing his emphasis on development or upgrading or development of the primary schools, the health centers and all of that, it might not resonate as much as it's resonating now with people, because man by nature, we are physical, we want to see things. So you put somebody in office as a governor, he has maybe like 4 year, he has a 4-year term. He wants to be able to point at A, B, C, D, 1 or 2, 3, 4 things that he's done. So what does it begin to do? You see governors building overhead bridges where bridges are not needed, because they know that if you invest in healthcare, education, all of those things that I believe that are fundamental, are critical to driving, in terms of social infrastructure, they're not likely that is not likely to resonate with the people as much as physical infrastructure. That's why you've seen people, apart from the other side, the people tell you that, of course, there's no money in that.
Mm.
I don't know how that is. You understand what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So both from economic experts, the people, the what do you call them? The people who are capital oriented, people who are more the free market specialists, people who push free market economy. They believe those things are supposed to be taken care of by yourself, and leave government should focus on things that are profitable. Whereas investment in social infrastructure is a long-term thing. The gains are not likely to come until many years thereafter. So that's why it appears that government people who are in office, in political leaders, tend to move away from it. But if we have to get things right, we can't but help or focus on social infrastructure.
And now talking about social infrastructure from the angle of where you have been able to establish it for us, meaning that the human capital aspect of it is quite very interesting, even though we cannot rule out the physical infrastructure that is also needed. But this brings me to the attention of countries like China, because if we see what China is doing in the area of human capital development, it has shown that they are even ahead of some other developed climes across the world. But from your own perspective, from your own perspective of understanding human capital, is that China model also a very likable route that we can also take? Because as important as it is, we see China and we see Nigeria going there to buy so many things for importation.
Well, it's a good model, but every model must be configured to suit your local realities. In a way, there are things we can borrow from China because, population, we have large population as well. So whatever you're doing, you're going to be able to, you'll be developing it in such a manner that to be labor intensive. In the sense that whatever you are designing, you must design in such a manner that your people will be able to gain employment. We have the advantage of, some people say we have cheap labor. So whatever you are doing, you must take that into consideration. But I think the fundamental thing is there has got to be a vision. There's got to be a vision. Each country must develop a vision, must carve out a vision for itself. The leadership must be able to say, okay, this is what we want to be. This is where we want to go. And it is when you have designed that, in the past, we used to have what we call industrial rolling plants.
Exactly.
So, the world has left us behind. So we need to sit down and decide for ourselves, okay, what are our strengths, what's economic cost, which areas do we have competitive advantage? What do we want to be known for? For instance, a place like Bangladesh, for instance, they focus on textile and making clothes and all of that. As simple as basic as that seems to be. So, and that is what it will entail. It's just for us to be able to, first of all, decide on a vision. We must have a visionary that we will say, okay, this is where I want to take Nigeria to in the next 10 years. Because of that, what countries do, for instance, when you design that vision, okay, you know that to be able to get to that place B that you want to get in 20 years, that means you need to train 10,000 engineers. That means you need to train 20,000 medical doctors. That means you need 50,000 teachers. And that is how it is. So the moment you have that plan on paper, then you begin execution. You now see, okay, do we need to spend for us to be able to have 1 million teachers by the year 2020? Does it mean we need to set up a specialist university of education in the different socio-political centers for all? We want to have 10,000 engineers. How are we going to achieve that? So first the vision, then the mission, and how do you execute? That is what is missing.
Exactly. And when you say what is missing, I could recall that in 2022 there was a development plan for 2020 to 2025. It's on the table of the Federal Ministry of Economic Planning as I speak right now. But with the current administration that is already in place, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, do you see any of his policies linked to that development plan of 2020 to 2025? Because one of the key objectives of that particular development plan is energy sufficiency for Nigeria. They also made mention of human capital, which is also one of the bane of that development plan. But as we speak right now, we see the president training people in ICT, agriculture. But does he have any correlation? Because you talk about vision of a leaders in Nigeria.
Well, I would say, in a way, they are on the right track. But the truth is that you need something completely fundamental, and a lot of this is not even at the level of the federal government. This vision has to be designed, and all the constituent the state governments and the local governments have to be brought into the picture, because it is when you have that vision that encompasses, that embraces everyone, that you can say, okay, Kano State, we will need you to focus on this, or like we now have what we call the regional development institutions. Like North South. Yeah, you could say, okay, Northeast Development Commission, this is what we need for you to focus on, and then Southwest, this is what we need you to focus on. So at the level of the ICT, where maybe there are regions that might have strength in that area, you could look at the Southeast, look at the apprenticeship system that has been in place. How can we tap into that? How can we configure it to suit our vision, to suit the direction in which we are moving as a country? So it's not just, I know what ICT, I don't know if you're talking about the MTF thing, but in terms of fundamental, I'm talking about a long-term fundamental vision. And I already pointed you at the direction of some of the challenges that we might have with executing that, because I recognize the fact that a political leader is voted to be in office for 4 years. 1 year, first year is trying to settle down. By second year, okay, it's just begin to get its bearing. Before the third year, you're already talking about the next election. So a 4-year tenure might not be the best solution to help us get a leader who will be able to think that long term. So you find that a lot of even development plans by people who are in office are planned around our election cycles. Elections are what determine, what drive all that we do. Because at the end of 3 years, you want to be able to point people, okay, I've done this, I've built 20 bridges, I've done 20 roads, I've done this, but investment in social infrastructure are not that tangible. They are not visible. If you invest massively in education, it will take maybe like another, let's say, you invest in primary, secondary education massively. It will take you another 16 years to be able to see the results. So that is where the problem is. Even though you are not asking me, and this is not, your focus here is on economic policy and all that, but I would believe that Nigeria will be better served with a parliamentary system, by a parliamentary system. That's my belief. I've always argued that. And I have my own understanding too as to how local governments should function. I do not think that local governments can actually stand as a third tier of government. I believe that's what the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution have in mind, are 2 tiers, and that local governments should be subsumed under state governments and made to function as local government, so that state governments can create as many local governments as they would want and make them function in line with the vision of each of the states. Government.
Exactly. I really love your submission in that regard. Everybody wants a very durable, conducive political system, political structure for Nigeria, particularly the one that will help us to drive our economy. There's nothing wrong with parliamentary system. Even economics of this world, whether presidential or parliamentary, but the key issue is that, as rightly pointed out, the vision of the leaders matters a lot. And you did mention of something, the development plan of Nigeria is supposed to be tied to the economic growth of Nigeria. But as we have it today, there is a big lacuna between our development plans and economic, policies, particularly the MTEF, the medium-term expenditure framework of the government. You also mentioned. But let's now take a critical look at this socio-economic infrastructure. One of the scary aspects of it is investment. Although you made mention in the line of one of your arguments that investing also play a major role. But where are we investing? But for me, let me ask you: is the government scared to invest in education, particularly human capital?
Government scared. The resources are limited. Once you have limited resources, the challenge is that, okay, look at some state government before the devaluation of the currency that has led to state governments being a bit awash with cash. Some of them are struggling to even be able to pay salaries. That means you look at budgets of states. By the time you take out the recurrent expenditure, take the larger chunk of it. So what's left? So this requires, investment in in fact, if you're talking about even the soft infrastructure, for instance, to have schools, to train people, you need to build schools. But where is it? Where is the money? So the resources are limited. Of course, you might say, okay, it's a question of prioritization. You prioritize that area, prioritize that area. But I like something interesting that you shared with me. Is there a way in which the private sector can come in? I think that's another we can begin to look at. You see what the previous administration did with I think it's what is called a road credit scheme, where some private enterprises were allowed to use what they were paid as tax to build roads.
Exactly. Tax credits.
Tax credits, like Dangote, MTN, and the rest of them have done. Maybe that's what we can consider as well. But then we have to, like I said, I want the emphasis to be at the level of the primary and secondary school, primary and secondary education, which is actually outside the purview of the federal government. So with a visionary leadership, I'm talking about a president who can bring in all the state governors and say, okay, this is where we are, and I'm not happy with where we are. I'm not happy that we do not have well-trained people to take advantage of the opportunities in the ICT sector. I'm not happy with the fact that we have 20,000 children who are out of school, and we need to come together to address this. And this is what we will do. There's I think there's the UBEC or something.
Yes, Master Basic Education Commission.
Yeah, that allows the federal government itself supports the SUBEB at every state level. That is something, that model can be rejigged in such a manner that right now I think where federal government puts in some money, then the state government puts their counterpart funding, and but I think the focus has always been on providing physical infrastructure, which many times then they have not even delivered on, because we've had allegations of corruption and all that's reduced some of those schemes in many of the states.
Exactly.
But a situation where, once that vision is clearly stated, and then there's an agreement. In crafting out the vision, you see the role of the government, the public sector, the role of the federal government, the role of the state government, the role of the local government, then the role of the private sector, the role of civil society organizations, and all. Everybody has a role. It's clear. You can see what role you need to play. We see how much we're trying to raise. Okay, let me give you a model. For instance, Lagos State many years ago came up with the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. As many of the private sector, the banks and all that, they are the ones who have been supporting that scheme, which is one of the reasons why the security situation in Lagos State improved over the years. But because there's a clearly laid out program, and in terms of governance, the corporate governance structure is very clear. Then many of the private sectors operators did not have an issue or a problem with being able to invest massively in that. So I think this is what I'm talking about. Right now, we have the education tax fund, where, with the support of private sector, they're able to raise money, and that money has helped tremendously in terms of providing infrastructure in some of our universities. Even though you even get reports again that some universities are not able to tap into it because they're not able to submit audited reports for maybe money they've received in the past. But I think between you and I, what we're saying is that even though too that ETF has provision for investment in social infrastructure, so it's not like government has not put out to it. We have the PTDF too that thinks about infrastructure. Some of those money, they vote money to send people abroad for training, and of course, some of the reports we've had that a lot of people have gone abroad for training. Some of them refuse to come back. So it's a multifaceted problem. But and of course, you cannot solve all these problems overnight. That's why I said what I think our focus should be at the primary level. Results will not come in overnight, but that is where we need to start, because that is where the problem is. Primary level. We need to tackle that problem from the primary level, primary and secondary education.
Exactly. Mr. Olorunfemi, it's nice having you on the show, and your submission are quite intelligent, very insightful, and resourceful at this point in time. I will tell you for free, many people concentrate on the aspect of the federal government, but you have made us understand that at least the state government have a role to play, particularly on the primary and secondary school aspect of our human capital development, which is quite very, very laudable. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sir.
You're welcome, my brother.
So maybe it's very soon we need to bring you on so that we can also have more deeper discussion around other aspects that you can offer your resourcefulness to us.
No problem. Anytime you're ready, let me know.
All right, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day in Abuja, sir.
I will. Thank you.
All right.